Trump calls Jasmine Crockett nasty woman on live TV until she reveals the DNA test proving Barron isn't his son and Melania's secret affair with his bodyguard. The CNN studios in Atlanta buzzed with an electric tension that only came with the biggest political stories of the year. It was March 15th, 2025, and what was supposed to be a routine primetime special on congressional oversight had transformed into the most anticipated political showdown in television history. Two titans of American politics were about to face off in front of 23.7 million live viewers, and nobody, not the producers, not the moderators, and certainly not the participants themselves, could have predicted how completely this confrontation would reshape the political landscape. Donald Trump sat in his designated chair on the right side of the gleaming CNN set, his signature red tie perfectly knotted, his orange-tinted hair styled with its usual gravity-defying precision. His small hands gestured emphatically as he spoke to the makeup artist, his voice carrying that familiar mixture of braggadocio and barely contained aggression that had defined his public persona for decades. He had insisted on this debate, demanded this platform, convinced that he could use it to destroy his greatest political nemesis once and for all. Across the stage, in the chair marked for the Democratic respondent, sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. She was reviewing notes with the same methodical precision that had made her one of the most feared investigators in Congress. Her black blazer was impeccably tailored, her jewelry minimal but elegant, and her expression carried the kind of calm focus that seasoned political observers had learned to recognize as dangerous. Unlike Trump's animated pre-show performance, Jasmine sat in perfect stillness, her dark eyes occasionally glancing toward her opponent with what could only be described as anticipation. Between them, veteran CNN anchor Anderson Cooper shuffled through his prepared questions, though he suspected that within minutes his carefully crafted interview would be abandoned in favor of whatever chaos was about to unfold. Cooper had moderated presidential debates, covered wars, and interviewed dictators, but even he felt the unusual tension crackling through the studio air. The technical crew made their final adjustments as the countdown to live broadcast began. Cameras zoomed in and out, testing angles. Audio technicians checked microphone levels. The teleprompter displayed the opening graphics. But all of this professional activity felt almost secondary to the personal animosity radiating from the two chairs at center stage. Trump had specifically requested this confrontation after Jasmine's recent congressional hearings had begun to expose what she called the systematic corruption at the heart of American politics. Her investigations had already claimed two Supreme Court justices and were beginning to circle closer to Trump's own business empire. Rather than hide from the scrutiny, Trump had chosen to attack, to go on the offensive, to use his considerable media savvy to destroy Jasmine before she could destroy him. It was a strategy that had worked for him countless times before. Use the media spotlight to control the narrative, to overwhelm opponents with bombast and misdirection, to turn serious policy discussions into personal attacks that his base would rally around. Trump had built his entire political career on this approach, and he saw no reason why it wouldn't work against one more ambitious Democrat who thought she could take him down. But Trump had no idea what Jasmine had discovered about his family. He had no idea about the documents in the leather portfolio sitting calmly in her lap. He had no idea that his marriage, his family, and his most carefully guarded secrets were about to be exposed in front of the largest television audience in American political history. The studio lights brightened to their full intensity. The cameras went live. Anderson Cooper looked directly into the lens and began his introduction. And somewhere in a penthouse in Manhattan, Melania Trump turned off her phone and poured herself a glass of wine, knowing that her life was about to change forever. Anderson Cooper's introduction lasted exactly 47 seconds before Trump interrupted him, his voice cutting through the studio like a buzz saw through silk. Anderson, let me just say something here. Trump began, his hand waving dismissively toward the moderator as his attention fixed entirely on Jasmine. Before we get into all these fake investigations and phony hearings, I think the American people deserve to know who they're really dealing with here. Cooper tried to regain control. Mr. President, we'll have time for... No, no. This is important, Trump continued, his voice rising with each word. This woman, this so-called Congresswoman, has been running around Washington making accusations, destroying reputations, pretending she's some kind of corruption fighter. But what about her? What about her background? What about her qualifications? Jasmine sat perfectly still, her hands folded over her portfolio, her expression unchanged. She could have been listening to a weather report for all the reaction she showed to Trump's opening salvo. I mean, look at her, Trump continued, his gesture encompassing Jasmine from head to toe. She comes from nowhere, wins one election, and suddenly she thinks she can take down presidents, Supreme Court justices, the most successful businessmen in America. Who does she think she is? The personal nature of the attack was immediately obvious to everyone watching. This wasn't policy criticism or political disagreement. This was character assassination, delivered with the kind of sneering contempt that Trump reserved for opponents he considered beneath his notice. She's never built anything, Trump pressed on, warming to his theme. Never created jobs, never made a payroll, never succeeded at anything except running her mouth and getting attention from the fake news media. And now she wants to lecture me about corruption? Me? I've been successful at everything I've ever done. Everything. Cooper made another attempt to steer the conversation towards substantive issues. Perhaps we could discuss the specific allegations, but Trump was in full attack mode now, his confidence building with each unopposed sentence. You know what this is really about? Trump said, leaning forward in his chair and pointing directly at Jasmine. This is about a nasty woman who can't stand that I'm more successful than she'll ever be. Can't stand that I've built a business empire, raised a beautiful family, married one of the most gorgeous women in the world. She's jealous, plain and simple. The phrase, nasty woman, hung in the air like a toxic cloud. It was Trump's favorite weapon against female opponents, a phrase he had used to devastating effect against Hillary Clinton and dozens of other women who had dared to challenge him. It was designed to diminish, to reduce complex political opposition to simple personal animosity. Everything she does, every investigation, every hearing, it all comes back to the same thing, Trump continued. She can't stand successful people, can't stand beautiful families, can't stand everything I represent. He paused for effect, his small hands gripping the arms of his chair. Look at my family, Anderson. Look at what I've built. My wife, Melania, absolutely gorgeous, speaks 5 languages, was a successful model before she met me. My son, Barron, brilliant kid, amazing athlete, destined for greatness just like his father. This is what success looks like. This is what a real family looks like. Trump's voice dropped to what he probably thought was a confidential tone, though the microphones picked up every word. And then you look at her, he said, jerking his head toward Jasmine. Bitter, angry, jealous of everything she can never have. That's what this is really about. The studio had fallen completely silent except for Trump's voice. Even the technical crew had stopped their usual bustling to watch what was clearly becoming something unprecedented. Cooper sat frozen, his prepared questions forgotten, as Trump delivered what was essentially a televised assassination of Jasmine's character, her family, and her motivations. But Jasmine still hadn't moved, still hadn't reacted, still sat with that same calm expression, as if she were watching a performance she had seen rehearsed many times before. And that lack of reaction was beginning to unnerve Trump more than any angry response would have. Trump had expected fury. He had expected interruptions, denials, emotional outbursts that would make Jasmine look unhinged and him look presidential by comparison. He had used the strategy hundreds of times before. Attack personally and viciously, force the opponent to respond emotionally, then position himself as the calm, reasonable voice being attacked by an unhinged opponent. But Jasmine's complete non-reaction was throwing off his rhythm. Her silence was somehow more powerful than any response could have been. Are you even listening to me? Trump demanded, his voice carrying an edge of genuine irritation. I'm talking about you, about your jealousy, about your complete lack of accomplishments, and you're just sitting there like he paused, searching for the right insult. Like you don't even care what people think about you. Still nothing from Jasmine. Not a blink, not a shift in posture, not even a change in breathing pattern. Cooper finally managed to interject. Congresswoman Crockett, would you like to respond to— "Oh, she'll respond," Trump said with a laugh that sounded increasingly forced. "She can't help herself. These nasty women, they always have to get the last word. They can't stand being put in their place." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, projecting the confident posture of someone who had just delivered a knockout blow. "Go ahead," he said, gesturing toward Jasmine with mock magnanimity. "Tell us how successful you are. Tell us about your perfect family. Tell us why you're qualified to investigate anyone." The invitation hung in the air for a long moment. The studio cameras held steady on both participants. Trump with his smug expression and crossed arms, Jasmine with her unchanged calm. And then, finally, Jasmine spoke. Her voice was quiet, measured, almost conversational. "Mr. Trump," she began, and something in her tone made every person in the studio lean forward slightly. "I appreciate your concern about qualifications and family values. Those are indeed important topics for anyone in public service." She paused, and for the first time since Trump's attack began, her hand moved to touch the portfolio in her lap. "Before we discuss my background," she continued, "perhaps we should establish some standards for what constitutes a successful family and honest qualifications. After all, if we're going to judge people by their family values and personal integrity, we should make sure we're all living up to the same standards." Trump's confident expression flickered slightly. This wasn't the defensive response he had expected. "I mean, you've talked about your beautiful wife and your brilliant son," Jasmine continued, her voice remaining perfectly calm. "You've presented your family as a model for American success. That's admirable. Family is important." Her fingers traced the edge of her portfolio. "So perhaps we could start there. Perhaps we could discuss what it really means to build a family based on love, trust, and honesty." Something in her tone had changed, not louder, not more aggressive, but somehow more focused, more precise, like a surgeon selecting the exact right instrument for a delicate operation. Trump sensed the shift, but couldn't identify it. "What are you implying?" he asked, his earlier confidence beginning to waver. Jasmine smiled. It was a small, knowing smile that somehow made the entire studio feel like it had dropped 10 degrees. "I'm not implying anything, Mr. Trump. I'm simply suggesting that if we're going to discuss family values and personal integrity, we should all be prepared to have our own families examined with the same scrutiny we apply to others." She opened her portfolio for the first time. "Because I have some questions about your family that I think the American people would find very interesting." The sound of Jasmine's portfolio opening was barely audible, but seemed to echo through the studio like a gunshot. Trump's eyes immediately fixed on the documents she was revealing, his earlier swagger replaced by something that looked almost like wariness. "What is that?" he demanded, his voice sharper than it had been moments before. "These are public records," Jasmine replied calmly, withdrawing a manila folder marked with official seals and stamps. "Documents that tell a very interesting story about family values and personal integrity." Cooper, sensing that the interview had taken a dramatic turn, leaned forward in his chair. "Congresswoman, what exactly are you referring to?" Jasmine held up the first document so that the studio cameras could capture it clearly. It appeared to be some kind of medical report, though the details weren't immediately visible to the viewing audience. "Mr. Trump," she began, her prosecutorial training evident in her measured cadence, "you just spent several minutes talking about your son, Barron. You called him brilliant, amazing, destined for greatness, just like his father. Those were your exact words." Trump nodded curtly. "That's right. Barron is a tremendous kid. Tremendous. You've often spoken publicly about how proud you are to be his father," Jasmine continued. "How much he looks like you, how he has your intelligence, your instincts, your natural abilities." "All true," Trump replied, though something in his posture had become more defensive. "During your 2016 campaign, you even joked about how Barron was definitely a Trump because of his height and his athletic ability. You said genetics don't lie." She paused to let that phrase sink in. "You're absolutely right about genetics, Mr. Trump. They don't lie." Jasmine opened the folder and withdrew what was clearly a laboratory report, official letterhead visible at the top. This is a DNA analysis conducted by Genome Laboratories in December 2024. It's a paternity test comparing genetic material from Donald Trump and Barron Trump. The studio went completely silent. Even the cameraman stopped moving. The test was conducted as part of a child custody investigation in New York Family Court, case number FC 2024-8821. The genetic material was obtained from hair samples collected during routine medical examinations. Trump's face had gone pale, but he managed to sputter. That's private medical information. That's illegal. Actually, it's part of a court proceeding that became public record when Melania Trump filed for legal separation in December 2024. Jasmine replied matter-of-factly. A filing that apparently escaped media attention until now. She held up the DNA report so the cameras could focus on the official seal and case number. According to this analysis, conducted by one of the most reputable genetic testing facilities in the country, there's a 0.02% probability that Donald Trump is the biological father of Barron Trump. The words hit the studio like a physical force. Cooper's jaw dropped. Trump half rose from his chair before collapsing back down. In layman's terms, Jasmine continued in the same calm tone she might use to read a weather report. Barron Trump is not Donald Trump's biological son. For a moment, Trump seemed incapable of speech. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound emerged. When he finally found his voice, it came out as a strangled roar. That's fake. That's completely fake. This is the most disgusting, dishonest attack I've ever seen. He was on his feet now, pointing at Jasmine with a shaking finger. You fabricated that document. You and your deep state friends, you manufactured fake DNA tests to try to destroy my family. This is illegal. This is defamation. Jasmine remained seated, her expression unchanged. Mr. Trump, this document bears the official seal of Genome Laboratories. Their accreditation number is clearly visible. The case number can be verified through New York Family Court records. Would you like me to provide the contact information so viewers can confirm the authenticity themselves? I don't care what fake seals you put on your fake documents. Trump shouted. Barron is my son. He looks just like me. Everyone says so. Actually, Jasmine said, reaching into her folder again, that raises an interesting point about physical resemblance. She withdrew a series of photographs, holding them up for the cameras. These are photographs of Barron Trump at various ages, alongside photographs of Viktor Kozlov, a former member of your security detail who worked at Trump Tower from 2004 to 2007. The photos showed a clear progression, Barron as a toddler, as a young boy, as a teenager, each image paired with a photo of a tall, athletic man with distinctly Slavic features. Viktor Kozlov is 6 feet 4 inches, played professional basketball in Europe before emigrating to the United States, and has the same distinctive bone structure, eye color, and facial features as Barron Trump. Trump was practically vibrating with rage. This is insane. You're showing random photos of random people and claiming Viktor Kozlov isn't random. Jasmine interrupted smoothly. He was employed by Trump Organization from 2004 to 2007. His employment records show he was specifically assigned to provide personal security for Melania Trump during her pregnancy with Barron. She pulled out another document. According to these payroll records, Viktor Kozlov received substantial bonuses and salary increases during 2005 and 2006, the period when Melania was pregnant. His compensation during those years was nearly triple what other security personnel received. Trump's denials were becoming increasingly incoherent. Employment records can be faked. Photos can be doctored. This is all lies. And then there's this, Jasmine said, producing what appeared to be a banking document. A wire transfer from a Trump Organization account to Viktor Kozlov in the amount of $2.3 million, dated March 15, 2007, 3 months after Barron's birth. The memo line reads, confidentiality agreement, final payment. Trump's aggressive denials were beginning to sound desperate rather than convincing. His face had cycled through several shades of red, and perspiration was visible on his forehead despite the air-conditioned studio. "You're making this up," he insisted. "My wife would never. Melania is loyal. She's faithful. She loves me." Jasmine nodded sympathetically. Marriage is indeed built on trust and fidelity. Which brings us to a very important question about your own commitment to those values. She reached into her portfolio again and withdrew what appeared to be a hotel receipt. The Ritz-Carlton in Vienna, Austria. September 12th to 15th, 2005. A 3-night stay registered to announce Melania's maiden name. Trump's objections became more frantic. She travels. So what? She's allowed to travel. The interesting thing about this particular trip, Jasmine continued, is that according to your own social media posts and news coverage, you were in New York during those exact dates. You attended a charity gala on September 13th and had a business meeting on September 14th. Both events were photographed and documented. She held up printouts of Trump's own Twitter posts from those dates, showing him clearly in New York while the hotel records showed Melania in Vienna. So, Melania was in Vienna while you were in New York. Traveling alone, apparently, since your name doesn't appear on any of the hotel documentation. She goes to spas. She has friends in Europe. This proves nothing. You're absolutely right that it proves nothing by itself, Jasmine agreed. But it becomes more interesting when you consider that Viktor Kozlov also traveled to Vienna during those exact same dates. She produced airline records showing Kozlov's flights from New York to Vienna, departing September 11th and returning September 16th. And even more interesting when you look at the hotel records showing that a V. Kozlov was registered in the suite directly adjacent to Melania's, with connecting door access. The studio had become so quiet that the humming of the air conditioning system was audible. Trump's mouth was moving, but no coherent words were emerging. The Vienna trip wasn't an isolated incident. Jasmine continued relentlessly. Hotel records show that Melania and Viktor Kozlov stayed at the same hotels in adjoining rooms on 14 different occasions between 2004 and 2006. She spread the hotel receipts across her table like a prosecutor laying out evidence for a jury. Paris, London, Milan, Monaco, Prague. Always the same pattern. Melania registered under her maiden name, Viktor in an adjacent room, always when you were documented to be elsewhere. Trump finally found his voice again. This is all fake. Hotel records can be fabricated. You probably bribed hotel clerks to create fake documents. That's an interesting theory, Jasmine replied calmly, which is why I also have this. From her portfolio, Jasmine withdrew what appeared to be a USB drive and a small tablet device. Hotel security footage, she announced simply. The Shangri-La Hotel in Paris, May 18th, 2005. Melania Trump and Viktor Kozlov entering and leaving the same suite, captured on multiple security cameras over a 3-day period. Trump lunged forward in his chair. "You can't show that. That's private. That's invasion of privacy." Actually, this footage was obtained legally through a French court order as part of an international investigation into financial crimes, Jasmine explained. The French authorities were investigating money laundering activities involving Trump Organization accounts, and this footage was discovered during their review of hotel security records. She connected the USB drive to her tablet and turned the screen toward the cameras. The timestamp shows 2:47 a.m. on May 19th, 2005. This is Melania Trump and Viktor Kozlov leaving the same hotel suite together. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. Two figures emerging from a hotel room. A woman matching Melania's height and build, and a tall man who clearly resembled the photos Jasmine had shown earlier. They moved together with the easy intimacy of people who were very familiar with each other. The hotel registry shows that this suite was booked under Melania's maiden name for 3 nights. During this same period, you were in Atlantic City for the opening of a new casino, as documented by numerous news reports and photographs. Trump was now standing and pacing behind his chair, his usual confidence completely shattered. This is doctored footage. This is deepfake technology. You can make anyone look like anyone else with computers. The footage has been authenticated by 3 independent digital forensics experts, Jasmine replied. Their reports are available as part of the French court filings. Would you like me to provide those contact details as well? She clicked to another video file. This is from the same hotel 6 hours earlier. The timestamp shows 8:23 p.m. on May 18th. Melania and Viktor entering the suite together, clearly comfortable with each other, clearly not maintaining any kind of professional security distance. The second video was even more damaging than the first. It showed the two figures entering the hotel room with Melania's hand resting casually on Viktor's arm, their body language suggesting intimacy rather than a professional security relationship. And this is my personal favorite, Jasmine said, clicking to a third file. Poolside at the hotel, May 19th, 11:30 a.m. Melania sunbathing while Viktor applies sunscreen to her back. Very thorough security work. Trump's pacing had become more frantic. This could be anyone. You can't tell who these people are from hotel security cameras. You're right that identification from security footage can be challenging, Jasmine acknowledged. Which is why I also have this. Jasmine withdrew a second device from her portfolio, what appeared to be a professional digital recorder. Melania Trump has been conducting her own investigation into your business activities for the past 3 years, she announced matter-of-factly. As part of that investigation, she's been recording conversations. Trump stopped pacing entirely. Recording what conversations? Conversations with you. Conversations with Viktor. Conversations with lawyers, accountants, and other people involved in what she discovered was a pattern of fraud, tax evasion, and criminal activity within Trump Organization. Jasmine held up the recorder so the cameras could see it clearly. These recordings were provided to federal investigators as part of Melania's cooperation agreement with the Southern District of New York. She's been working with prosecutors for over 2 years, providing evidence of criminal activity in exchange for immunity from prosecution. The color had completely drained from Trump's face. This particular recording is from March 2023. It's a phone conversation between Melania and Viktor Kozlov discussing their son's college applications. She pressed play. Melania's voice emerged from the speakers, clear and unmistakable. Viktor, we need to be careful about Barron's applications. If anyone runs a background check and discovers the truth about his parentage, it could complicate everything. A man's voice responded, heavily accented, presumably Viktor. Melania, we discussed this. As long as Donald never demands a paternity test, Barron is legally his son. The boy doesn't even know. But what if Donald becomes suspicious? What if he figures out the timing? He won't. He's too narcissistic to admit he might have been cuckolded. His ego won't let him even consider it. Melania's laugh was audible through the speakers. You're right. He's so convinced of his own virility that he'd never question whether Barron is actually his. Trump was now gripping the back of his chair so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. This is fake. You hired actors. This is all fabricated. The audio has been verified by the FBI's Technical Analysis Unit, Jasmine replied. Voice pattern analysis confirms that this is indeed Melania Trump and Viktor Kozlov. The recording equipment and metadata have been authenticated by federal forensics experts. She pressed play again for another segment, Viktor's voice. What about the other recordings? The ones where Donald admits to the tax fraud. Melania, those are safely stored. If he tries to contest the divorce or custody arrangements, I'll release everything to the prosecutors. How many recordings do you have? Over 300 hours. Enough to send him to prison for the rest of his life. The revelation that his own wife had been recording him for years, combined with the evidence of her affair and Barron's true parentage, had pushed Trump beyond his psychological breaking point. He was no longer the confident, aggressive politician who had opened the interview. He was a broken man watching his carefully constructed life collapse in real time. Melania wouldn't do this, he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. She loves me. We have a good marriage. She's loyal. Jasmine's expression softened slightly, showing what might have been sympathy. Mr. Trump, According to the court filings in New York, Melania began working with federal investigators in January 2023 after she discovered evidence of massive financial crimes within Trump Organization. She was facing potential prosecution herself for money laundering activities. She pulled out another legal document. This is her cooperation agreement with the Southern District of New York. In exchange for providing evidence against you and other co-conspirators, she received complete immunity from prosecution and protection under the Federal Witness Protection Program. Trump's legs seemed to give out. He collapsed back into his chair, his earlier bombast replaced by something that looked like genuine grief. She's been lying to me for 2 years. According to the FBI case notes, Melania has been documenting your criminal activities, your business fraud, and your personal corruption since early 2023. She has recordings of you discussing tax evasion, money laundering, bribing officials, and threatening witnesses. Jasmine held up a thick file folder. This is a summary of the evidence she's provided. It includes documentation of over $400 million in unreported income, $127 million in fraudulent tax deductions, and evidence of criminal conspiracy involving at least 12 other individuals. The implications were staggering. Not only had Trump's marriage been exposed as a fraud, but his wife had been working with federal prosecutors to build a criminal case that could send him to prison for life. Why would she do this? Trump asked, his voice barely above a whisper. According to her sworn statement to federal investigators, Melania discovered in late 2022 that you had been planning to divorce her and leave her with nothing. You had been moving assets offshore, hiding money in shell companies, and preparing to claim that she had no legal right to any of your wealth. Trump tried to object, but his voice was too weak to carry conviction. That's not. I wouldn't. You had also been threatening to expose Viktor Kozlov's immigration status and have him deported if Melania ever tried to leave you. Essentially, you were using her affair and Barron's parentage as blackmail to keep her trapped in the marriage. Jasmine's tone remained calm and professional, but there was an undertone of steel that suggested she had personal feelings about this particular form of abuse. When Melania realized that you were planning to destroy her financially and separate her from both Viktor and Barron, she decided to protect herself by cooperating with federal authorities. As if the personal revelations weren't devastating enough, Jasmine was now transitioning to the criminal evidence that Melania had been collecting. Let's discuss some of the recordings that Melania provided to federal investigators. Jasmine said, consulting her notes. This one is from April 2023, a conversation between you and your accountant about hiding income from the IRS. She pressed play on the audio device. Trump's voice was immediately recognizable. Listen, we need to be smarter about this. The feds are sniffing around, and we can't have them finding all the offshore accounts. Another voice responded, presumably the accountant. Mr. Trump, we're already pushing the limits of what's legal. If they audit us and find the Cayman Islands money, they won't find it if you do your job right. That's what I pay you for. But sir, we're talking about over $50 million in unreported income just from last year. So, rich people don't pay taxes. That's how you stay rich. Trump tried to interrupt the playback. This is taken out of context. You don't understand business. But Jasmine continued playing the recording. What about the charity money? The fund from the Trump Foundation that we diverted to personal accounts. What about it? It's my foundation. I can do whatever I want with the money. Sir, that's technically fraud. The foundation is supposed to be for charitable purposes. The IRS isn't going to prosecute a former president. They don't have the balls. The studio was in complete silence except for the devastating audio playing from Jasmine's device. Every word was Trump's own voice, recorded by his own wife, admitting to tax evasion and charity fraud. This recording alone, Jasmine noted, provides evidence of willful tax evasion, charity fraud, and conspiracy to defraud the United States government. Federal sentencing guidelines suggest a minimum of 15 years in prison for these charges. She clicked to another audio file. This conversation is from June 2023. You're discussing bribing a federal judge to dismiss criminal charges against one of your business associates. Trump's voice again emerged from the speakers. Judge Patterson owes me. I helped fund his campaign, and now it's time for him to return the favor. Mr. Trump, are you asking me to contact a federal judge about an ongoing case? I'm asking you to remind him about our friendship and our mutual interests. Sir, it sounds like how business gets done in Washington. Patterson knows what side his bread is buttered on. The criminal recordings were damaging enough, but Jasmine wasn't finished with her evidence presentation. Melania also provided federal investigators with detailed financial records showing how you've been laundering money through Trump Organization properties for over a decade, she announced, pulling out banking documents. These records show a pattern of cash transactions designed to avoid federal reporting requirements. Real estate purchases, casino operations, and golf course revenues that were systematically underreported to avoid taxes and hide the source of funds. She spread the financial documents across her table like a prosecutor building a RICO case. Between 2015 and 2023, Trump Organization received over $230 million in cash transactions that were not properly reported to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. This represents one of the largest money laundering operations ever discovered in the United States. Trump was now staring at the documents with the expression of someone watching his own execution. The money trail shows connections to Russian oligarchs, Saudi princes, and Chinese business interests that were specifically concealed to avoid federal oversight and national security reviews. She held up what appeared to be a bank routing slip. This single transaction from March 2022 shows a $15 million cash deposit from a shell company ultimately controlled by sanctioned Russian entities. The money was immediately transferred through 3 different Trump Organization accounts to obscure its origin. The federal investigation has identified over 400 such transactions, totaling more than $800 million in potentially illegal money transfers. Trump tried to mount a defense. International business involves complex transactions. This doesn't prove anything illegal. Actually, it proves quite a lot when combined with these, Jasmine said, producing a new set of documents. Email communications between you and foreign agents discussing specific payments in exchange for policy considerations. She began reading from what appeared to be printed emails. Email from you to Dmitry Kozlov, Viktor's cousin. Incidentally, dated January 15, 2023. The sanctions relief package is moving through Congress. As discussed, this should open up significant business opportunities for our mutual friends. Dmitry's response: understood. The $25 million discussed will be transferred through the usual channels upon confirmation of the policy changes. Your reply: always a pleasure doing business with professionals who understand the value of friendship. As devastating as the domestic criminal evidence was, the international conspiracy allegations were potentially treasonous. Federal investigators have identified a pattern of communications between you and foreign intelligence services spanning nearly a decade, Jasmine announced, her voice taking on the gravity appropriate for discussing national security crimes. These communications, recorded by Melania and corroborated by NSA intercepts, show that you've been providing classified information to foreign governments in exchange for business favors and personal financial gain. She held up what appeared to be a transcript marked with classification stamps. This is a recording from July 2023, a phone conversation between you and a known Russian intelligence operative discussing U.S. military positions in Eastern Europe. Trump's voice emerged from the audio device, unmistakably discussing sensitive information. The NATO exercises in Poland are scheduled for September. 3 battalions, mostly stationed near the border. My contacts at the Pentagon say they're vulnerable to electronic surveillance. A heavily accented voice responded. This information is very valuable to our mutual friends. The financial arrangements we discussed can be completed within the week. Make sure it's routed through the Cayman accounts. Can't have it traced back to me. Trump was now openly weeping, his political persona completely destroyed. Stop, please stop. But Jasmine continued relentlessly. This conversation alone constitutes treason under federal law. The penalty for providing classified military information to foreign adversaries is death or life imprisonment. She clicked to another recording. This is from August 2023. You're discussing the sale of state secrets to Chinese intelligence services. Trump's voice again. The submarine technology blueprints are worth at least $100 million. My guy at the Navy Department can get copies. A different voice with what sounded like a Chinese accent. Our associates are prepared to transfer the funds immediately upon delivery. Wire it to the Singapore accounts. And make sure there's a bonus for my guy at the Pentagon. But perhaps the most damaging evidence, Jasmine said, reaching into her portfolio one final time, is this video recording from your home office in Mar-a-Lago. She produced a tablet and connected it to the studio's display system. Melania installed hidden cameras throughout your residence as part of her cooperation with federal investigators. This footage shows you destroying classified documents in January 2024 after you learned about the federal investigation. The video showed Trump in what was clearly his private office, feeding documents into a paper shredder while speaking to someone off camera. Make sure every copy is destroyed. If the feds find these documents, I'm finished. A voice responded, apparently one of his lawyers. Sir, these are classified materials. Destroying them is a federal crime. Everything I do is a federal crime, according to these prosecutors. At least this way they can't prove anything. The video continued showing Trump methodically destroying what appear to be hundreds of pages of documents. This footage, Jasmine noted, shows willful destruction of evidence, obstruction of justice, and illegal handling of classified materials. Combined with all the other evidence, federal prosecutors estimate you're facing over 400 years in prison. Trump was now completely non-functional, slumped in his chair like a broken marionette. Anderson Cooper, who had been silent through most of this devastating presentation, finally found his voice. Mr. Trump, do you have any response to these allegations? Trump looked up with tear-streaked eyes, his orange makeup running in visible streams down his cheeks. Jasmine, he whispered, his voice barely audible through the studio microphones. Why are you doing this to me? Jasmine's expression remained calm, professional, but her next words carried the weight of absolute moral authority. Mr. Trump, you call me a nasty woman because I investigate corruption. You attacked my family, my qualifications, my character. You try to destroy me personally because I threatened your criminal empire. She stood up for the first time during the entire interview, her full height and presence commanding the studio. But I didn't destroy your family. You did. I didn't create fake paternity documents. You accepted them. I didn't force your wife to have an affair. Your abuse and threats drove her to it. Her voice grew stronger, more passionate. I didn't make you commit treason. I didn't make you launder money. I didn't make you threaten witnesses and destroy evidence. Those were your choices. She gestured toward all the documents spread across her table. All I did was collect the evidence of your crimes and present it to the American people. If that makes me a nasty woman, then I'll wear that title with pride. Trump tried to speak, but only sobs emerged. The difference between us, Jasmine continued, is that when you attack someone, you attack their character, their family, their personal lives. When I attack someone, I attack their crimes. She began packing her documents back into her portfolio with calm efficiency. Your marriage was a fraud. Your son isn't yours. Your business is a criminal enterprise. Your political career was built on betraying your own country. And now, thanks to your own wife's courage in exposing you, the American people know the truth. As if summoned by Jasmine's words, the studio doors opened and 6 federal agents entered in formation. They wore the distinctive windbreakers of the FBI, their faces grim with purpose. The lead agent, a tall woman with steel gray hair, approached Trump's chair with an arrest warrant clearly visible in her hand. Donald John Trump, she announced in a voice that carried clearly through the studio. You're under arrest for treason, conspiracy to commit espionage, money laundering, tax evasion, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to defraud the United States government. Trump didn't resist as the agents helped him to his feet. He seemed incapable of resistance, his spirit completely broken by the revelations of the past hour. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Trump looked back at Jasmine one final time. Will I ever see Barron again? He asked, his voice like a child's. Jasmine's expression softened slightly, but her answer was firm. That will be up to Viktor and Barron to decide. But given that you've spent 16 years lying to a boy about his true parentage while threatening his real father with deportation, I wouldn't expect a warm reunion. The agents began leading Trump toward the exit. As they reached the studio doors, he turned back one more time. I never meant for it to go this far. Jasmine's response was quiet but carried clearly through the silent studio. Yes, you did. You meant every bit of it. The only thing you didn't mean was to get caught. The moment the studio doors closed behind Trump and his federal escort, chaos erupted. Phones rang continuously as news organizations around the world scrambled to process what they had just witnessed. Social media exploded with clips, analysis, and commentary. Within 30 minutes, #NastyWoman was trending worldwide with over 15 million mentions. Anderson Cooper, still visibly shaken by what he had moderated, turned to Jasmine with obvious awe. Congresswoman Crockett, in 30 years of journalism, I've never seen anything like what just happened here. How long have you been preparing for this moment? Jasmine was calmly organizing her remaining documents, her composure in stark contrast to the chaos around her. Anderson, I've been investigating Trump's criminal activities for 3 years. But I've been preparing for this specific moment since the day he first called me a nasty woman on social media. She looked directly into the camera, addressing the millions of viewers who were still processing what they had witnessed. The American people deserve to know when their leaders are criminals. They deserve to know when their president is a traitor. And they deserve to know that no one, no matter how powerful, no matter how wealthy, no matter how connected, is above the law. Cooper leaned forward. What happens next? What can Americans expect in the coming days and weeks? Federal prosecutors have been building cases against Trump and his associates for over 2 years, Jasmine replied. Tonight's evidence represents only a fraction of what they've uncovered. I expect we'll see additional arrests, additional charges, and a very long trial that will expose the full extent of his criminal enterprise. She paused, considering her next words carefully. But more importantly, I hope Americans will remember that this is what accountability looks like. This is what happens when we refuse to accept corruption as normal, when we refuse to let powerful people escape consequences for their actions. 5 years after the televised confrontation that destroyed Trump's criminal empire, Jasmine Crockett was elected as the youngest Speaker of the House in American history. Her anti-corruption platform had resonated with voters across party lines, leading to the most diverse and reform-minded Congress in generations. Trump himself remained in federal prison, where he spent his days writing increasingly incoherent letters to news organizations claiming that he was the victim of the biggest witch hunt in history. His few remaining supporters had largely abandoned him as evidence of his crimes continued to mount. Melania and Viktor Kozlov had established a quiet life in Switzerland, where they ran a foundation helping other victims of domestic abuse and political persecution. Barron, now in university studying international law, had become an advocate for government transparency and accountability. And somewhere in Washington, D.C., in a secure office building, Jasmine Crockett continued her work, investigating corruption, exposing criminals, and proving that in America, no one is above the law. The girl who had been called a nasty woman for asking tough questions had become the woman who saved American democracy by demanding honest answers. The investigation never stopped. The accountability never ended. And the truth, as it always does, had set America free.